Okay, so in this video we're going to be looking at z-scores. The z-score is the number of standard deviations the score is from the mean. Your reference sheet has a formula to convert scores into z-scores, but the variables are not listed. Also, it's important to make sure your algebra skills are up to date so you can rearrange for values other than the z-score, which we will look at in the next exercise. So on your formula sheet, you have this formula. Z is equal to x minus x bar over s. Z is the z-score, or the standardized score. X is the score itself. X bar is the mean, and S is the standard deviation. So you have the z-score is equal to the score minus the mean all over the standard deviation. So what does it mean? A z-score of 0 means that the score is equal to the mean. Okay, so a z-score of 0 means you have a score that's equal to the mean. So let's say, for example, that the mean or the average for a test was 68. That means if you got a z-score of 0, that means you got a score of 68. Okay. A positive score means that the score is above the mean. Okay, above the mean. If you have a look here, all the positive z-scores are above the mean. A negative z-score means that the score is below the mean. You can see that here. All the negative z-scores are below the mean. So in the test, you want to have a positive z-score. That means you're above average. Let's have a look at a few examples. So worked example 1, calculating the z-score. For a normal distribution, the mean is 62 and the standard deviation is 11. Find the z-score for 84 and interpret this result. So we know that the z-score is equal to the score minus the mean divided by the standard deviation. Well, we got 84. The mean is 62 and the standard deviation is 11. Let's see what we get when we put this in the calculator. 84 minus 62 over 11 is 2. Positive 2. So we found a z-score, but we still need to interpret this result. What does that mean? It means that 84 is 2 standard deviations above the mean. We know it's above because 2 is a positive number. Or if you think about it logically, 84 is more than 62. So you got an above average score. Let's have a look at worked example 2. Ruby gained a mark of 70 for a test. What is the z-score if the class mean was 78 and the standard deviation was 6? Answer correct to 1 decimal place. So again, formula. Z-score is equal to the score minus the mean divided by the standard deviation. Here, the score is 70 minus the mean, which is 78, divided by the standard deviation, which is 6. (70 minus 78 all over 6 is minus 1.3 to 1 decimal place. So what does that mean? Because it's negative, it means that the score is below the mean, right? 70 is 1.3 standard deviations below the mean. Okay, I don't say 70 is negative 1.3 standard deviations. I just say it's 1.3 standard deviations below. That's where the negative comes in, below the mean. Example 3. The heights of a group of young women have a mean of x is equal to 160 centimeters, and a standard deviation of s is equal to 8 centimeters. Determine the standard z-scores of a woman who is 172 centimeters tall. So let's just keep practicing this. Hopefully we'll memorize the formula by the end of this lesson. The z-score is the score minus the mean divided by standard deviation. Well, the score here is 172. The mean is 160. And the standard deviation is 8. (172 minus 160 over 8 is 1.5. That means a woman who is 172 centimeters tall is 1.5 standard deviations above the mean height of 160 centimeters. Question B. This time, the score is 150. So the z-score is going to be 150 minus the mean 160 all over the standard deviation of 8. 150 minus 160 over 8, which is negative 1.25. Remember that negative sign means that the score is below the mean. It's below the mean. In this case, it's 1.25 standard deviations below the mean. What if a woman was 160 centimeters tall? Well, the z-score will be 160 minus 160 over 8. Okay, the height minus the mean divided by the standard deviation. Well, we know 160 minus 160 is 0, and 0 divided by anything is 0. So the z-score of 0 means that this woman who's 160 centimeters tall is the mean, or has the mean height, the average height of a woman. Let's have a look at the last example. What is the z-score that corresponds to a score that is the mean? Well, we just worked it out. We've got the formula, z-score is the score minus the mean divided by s. Well, if the score is the mean, technically we have x bar minus x bar over s, and x bar minus x bar is 0, and 0 divided by s is just 0. What about someone who has 1 standard deviation above the mean? So, the z-score, this is the formula, x minus x bar over s. Well, if the score is 1 standard deviation above the mean, I'm going to replace that with the mean plus the standard deviation. Okay, so that's 1 standard deviation above the mean minus the mean all over s. So I've just substituted this with that 1 standard deviation above the mean. x bar minus x bar cancel each other out, and I'm left with the standard deviation divided by standard deviation, which is just 1. Okay, so a z-score of 1 means that you are 1 standard deviation above the mean. What about 1 standard deviation below the mean? Well, let's write down our formula again. The score minus x bar over s. Well, we know that if you're 1 standard deviation below the mean, that's the mean minus the standard deviation. Okay, so that's this part. I'm replacing the score with this. It's like you got 1 standard deviation below the mean. Minus the mean over the standard deviation, so that's the rest of the formula. Well, it looks like our means cancel each other out. X bar minus x bar is 0. And so we're left with negative s over s, which simplifies to minus 1. So, just to reiterate, if you get a z-score of 0, that means your score is exactly the same as the mean, the average. If you get a z-score of 1, it means your score is 1 standard deviation above the mean. If you get a z-score of minus 1, that means your score is 1 standard deviation below the mean. Alright, so for the rest of this lesson and for your homework, I'll get you to work on exercise 9c, which is on page 356, questions 1 to 8 and 10. That's it for this video.